Let's unlock a super powerful part of Rust, traits with generics. If you've watched the last two videos, you've already seen generics and traits separately. But when we combine them, that's when things get really flexible. It's how you build APIs that are reusable, expressive, and still 100% safe at compile time. Let's start simple. Imagine we want to write a function that prints any value, but only if that value can actually be printed. Here's what that might look like. So here, t is generic, but we constrain it using a trait-bound t display. This says, you can call this function with any type t, as long as t implements display. Let's test it in main. It is successfully printing an i32 integer and a string slice, both of which implement display. Now if I try printing a vector, compiler error. Vector of type i32 doesn't implement display. Because vector of type i32, a vector of integers, does not inherently implement display, highlighting the trait bounds enforcement. That's the power of trait bounds, compile time safety, and flexibility at the same time. What if you want to require more than one trait? Easy, you just chain them with a plus. This function print and clone accepts any type t, as long as t implements both the display trait and the clone trait. It clones the provided item, and then prints both the original and the cloned versions. So, t must implement both display and clone. Let's try it with a string. This works. It successfully compiles because string implements both display and clone. But if you try it with a type that doesn't implement display or clone, the compiler's going to catch that. The second call with file will cause a compilation error because file does not implement the display and clone trait, thus failing to satisfy the generic function's trait bounds. As your functions grow, those trait bounds can get a little messy. Thankfully, Rust gives us a cleaner way to write them, the where clause. Let's rewrite the last function. Now we are using a where clause to explicitly state that t must implement both the display trait and the clone trait. This is where clause makes the function more readable, by separating the type parameters from their constraints. Let's take this to a new level. Suppose we have a generic struct. This container struct holds a value of any type t. Now we want to implement a method that only works if t implements display. Here's how we do that. This implement block provides a show method, which is available if t implements display, allowing the container's value to be printed. Now let's try it. In the main function, an integer container and a string container are created and their show method is called. Nice! But now imagine we also want a version of container where t implements clone and partial EQ, maybe for comparisons. We can write multiple implement blocks, each with their own trait bounds. This implement block provides a compare method, available if t implements both clone, to duplicate the internal value for comparison, and partial EQ, to check for equality. We can use this implement block as well. The compare method is called on the integer container, demonstrating how different functionalities become available depending on the trait implementations of the generic type t. This kind of specialization is super useful. You get different capabilities depending on what traits your type satisfies. So what if we define our own trait, and then implement it for a generic type? Let's say we have this trait. This summarized trait requires implementing types to provide a summary method that returns a string. And we want to implement it for container of type t, but only when t implements display. Here's how we do that. This implement block conditionally implements the summarized trait for any container type where t itself implements display, providing a summary method that returns a formatted string including the container's displayable value. This conditional implementation means that any container whose inner value can be displayed can also be summarized by converting its value into a descriptive string. And now in main, we are creating a container holding an integer, which implements display, and successfully calling its summary method to print a descriptive string. Again, Rust enforces that the generic type must fulfill the trait requirements before it lets you call the trait method. You can also take traits as inputs to your functions, without naming the generic type, using something called implement trait syntax. Here's the old way. Here's the new way. The first syntax uses a generic type parameter t with a trait bound, while the second uses implement trait syntax, which is syntactic sugar for the same concept, both indicating that item can be any type that implements display. This is exactly the same. It just reads better when you don't need to reuse the type name t. And you can combine multiple traits here too. In this case, input item must implement the display and clone trait. Pretty neat, right? The implement trait syntax in the function signature is a convenient shorthand for defining these trait bounds. Now I want to show you something super powerful: generic traits with associated types. Let's say we want a trait that defines a storage interface. This storage trait defines common operations for storing data, specifically requiring an associated type item to represent the type of elements it holds, along with add and get methods. Now let's implement this for a vector of type T wrapper. A myVec struct, which internally uses a vector of type T, implements this storage trait, explicitly declaring its item type to be T, the same as its generic parameter, and implementing add and get using vectors push and get methods respectively. This way, the storage trait doesn't need to be generic over T. It just says, you tell me what type you're working with. It's clean, expressive, and extremely rusty. Now we can use it like this. In main function, first, we are creating an instance of myVec, adding several integer values to it using the traits add method, and then safely retrieving and printing an element at a specific index using the get method, illustrating how associated types allow a trait to define a type that is specific to the implementing type, rather than being a generic parameter of the trait itself. One last bonus trick: you can return a type that implements a trait without saying what it is. Let's create a function that returns something displayable. This function showcases implement trait in the return position, a feature that allows a function to return a type that implements a specific trait without explicitly naming the concrete type. Here, the makeDisplayItem function is declared to return implement display, meaning it will return some type that implements the display trait. In this case, it returns a string literal, which indeed implements display. This is great for hiding concrete types behind abstractions, like trait objects, but still staying monomorphic. Combining traits with generics gives you the flexibility of dynamic programming, with the performance of native code and the safety of compile time checks.